Okay, so welcome to Yoga Over 50 from Blue Point Yoga Studio. My name is Lynn, and I just had a little look to see who's here this morning. So it's great to see all these familiar faces show up on my screen, and we will begin. So today we're going to do some things with axial extension of the spine. So lengthening the spine on its natural set of curves. But we'll start by doing that on the floor. So go ahead and lie down on your back. We'll settle in here. I'll try not to turn off my headphones by accident by bopping them today. So lie down on your back. To begin with, have your knees bent and your feet flat. Let your arms rest out to your side, just wherever it's comfortable, but with the palms facing up. And then press through your feet and raise your bum a little bit and sort of stretch your bum away from your body and then set it back down. So you're kind of creating as much length in your spine as you can. And then your choice, whether to leave your feet flat with the knees bent or whether to extend the legs along the floor and just let the feet comfortably roll away. Whichever you like, whichever seems more comfortable is fine. Just trying to create a long spine to begin. Draw your attention inward. Let go of whatever is circling around in your mind today. Let go of it for the next hour. Give it a break. Bring your attention toward your breath. And just kind of notice as you're lying on the floor what sensations you feel as you breathe in and as you breathe out. So maybe you can feel your chest and your belly rising up toward the ceiling and then falling back down. Maybe you feel the back of your hips and the back of your ribs and the back of your shoulders press into the floor and then draw away a little bit. Maybe you feel the sides of your body press out toward your arms. And then draw back and make a little more space. Breathe in and out through your nose. And try to breathe through your nose as much as possible. Of course, if you've got a lot of allergies or something and your nose is plugged up, use your mouth if you need to. So in keeping with the idea of lengthening the torso, lengthening the spine, let's do a little breath practice that kind of helps that a bit. So we'll do the lengthening the lungs breath practice. So, you know, the lungs are really very big. They go almost from the bottom of the ribs down to the very small ribs that are near your waist, all the way up a little bit above the collarbone. So they really can take up a lot of space in your upper torso. So we're just going to try lengthening them on an inhale. So direct your attention to your left lung. And as you inhale, imagine that you could stretch the bottom end of the lung further down toward your left hip, and you could stretch the upper end of your left lung further up toward your left shoulder. And after you've filled the lung and lengthened it as far as it'll go, be sure to let your breath out completely. And just repeat that a few times, giving your attention to the left side. And then move your attention over to the right lung and do the same thing there. On an inhale, stretching the bottom end of the right lung down further toward your right hip, and stretching the upper end of the right lung further toward your right shoulder. And do that a few times. Remember to exhale fully. And now for a few breaths, do both lungs at once. Fill them up fully, stretching the bottom ends down toward the hips, the top ends up toward the shoulders, and take your time exhaling fully in between. Take one extra full breath after you've filled your lungs, fill them a little bit more, and then exhale generously to empty the lungs completely. And then go back to your unobserved breathing. So we'll take that really full breath. So maybe you felt a little extra spreading of the ribs, maybe a little unsticking of some parts of the lungs so that you can be really free in extending the spine here and using all of the torso. So bend one leg at a time to bring your feet flat to the floor at hip joints width apart. So find the bony corners, go a little bit to the inside and a little bit toward your feet. Let your knees wobble in and out. You'll feel where the top of your femur is moving in the hip socket, and that's where we are at hip joints width apart. Let your arms rest by your sides with the palms facing in this time. And we're going to do a little bridging with arm motion. And you're going to rise up, pressing through the feet, raising the hips, raising the arms up alongside your ears, back behind you. And then when you let yourself back down on an exhale, draw your heels toward you and stretch your bum toward your heels so that when you set yourself back down, you'll again have the longest spine possible. And we'll just repeat that a few times with your breath. Inhaling to raise the bum and the arms overhead, exhaling and pulling with the feet to stretch your hips down toward your heels, letting your spine down with as much length between the vertebrae as you can get. Just a few more of those, really stretching the spine. You can leave the arms out if that distracts you from stretching out the spine on your way down, on the way up too. And let's do once more. So the spine's getting very long. It's getting very long on the way up, and it's getting very long as you set your bum back down again. And then stretch your arms out to the side with the palms facing up, and take some easy sways of the knees, using an inhale to let the knees down to one side, and using the abdominal muscles on the exhale to draw the legs through the center. So really make a conscious effort to engage especially the abdominal muscles below the waist to move the legs back and forth. When you've done an even number to both sides, come back to the center, stretch the legs out long as it's comfortable for your back, and reach your arms up overhead. I'm not going to reach my arms too close so that I don't turn my headphones off, but you reach from heel to fingertips along both sides of the body, then from the left heel to the left fingertip, and relax back together. And then from the right heel to the right fingertip, and relax back toward the center. And then across the body from the right hand to the left fingertips, and relax back to the center. And from the left heel to the right fingertips, and relax back to the center again. And now we'll use a long spine as the starting point for some other movements of the spine. So cross your right foot over the left ankle and grasp the right wrist rather with the left hand. And now move your hands and your feet off to the left side of your body and take an extra stretch along the open right side. I hope I said left and right. So you're making sort of a banana shape of your body, still resting on the floor. And then come back to the center, move the hands and the feet back to the center, switch the crossing of the ankles and the grasp of the wrist, and move your hands and feet off a little to the right. And inhale, take an extra stretch along the open left side of your body, breathing into the left ribs there. And then come back to the center and release the grasp and uncross the feet. And exhale your arms back down to your sides. Bring in one knee, then the other. Draw them in toward your chest. You can just hold them loosely behind the thigh or on the shins or on your pants, drawing them a little apart from each other so that they span the torso. Hug them up toward your chest. Let your bottom come up off the floor a little bit, and then see if you can let your tailbone, the back bottom of your spine in the back down onto the floor. So see if you can have your knees hugged into your chest at the same time as your whole spine is resting on the floor. Just an experiment. If it doesn't sit down there easily with the knees hugged in tight, that's just information. No point of judgment. And then let the knees back down to the floor and take another couple of side-to-side sways and let that roll you to one side. Rest there for a moment. And then use your arms to press yourself up away from the floor, and we'll come around to hands and knees. So you're going to line up with the knees under the hip joints and the wrists under the shoulders, side to side, maybe a little ahead of the shoulders, front to back, if you like a little less angle at the wrists. Adjust my headphones carefully so they don't fall off. And we're putting the knees under the hips, front to back as well as side to side. And now we're looking for a long spine here. So see if you can stretch your spine out from the sits bones pointing back behind you to the crown of your head where your hair comes out. So right up here, kind of at the back of the top of the head, reaching forward so your eyes are looking toward the floor, but a bit ahead of your hands. And then we'll exhale and sink back into an extended child's pose, reaching the hips back and reaching the hands out to the front. You can let your head rest down if it rests comfortably. If you have something handy like a towel that you need to prop it up, that'll be fine too. So we're taking a long, long spine here, all along the sides of the body, up under the armpits, out through the fingertips, pressing them into the floor. And then inhale to come back forward to hands and knees. If you need to readjust where your hands and your knees are, that'll be fine. And we'll do a little spinal balance here, also concentrating on the longest spine possible. So on an inhale, bring your right leg back and your left arm out alongside the ear and really take a long stretch from the heel up through the fingertips. Stretching the spine long, but we're not distorting it from side to side, and exhale back down. And then on the other side, inhaling up, stretching long, toes pointing straight down toward the floor, and exhale back down. Back to the first side, inhaling up, stretching long, toes pointing straight down, and exhale down, and inhale up on the other side, stretching long, and exhale back down, and another stretch back into child's pose, lengthening the spine here, stretching along both sides of the body. And then on an inhale, just raise your body slightly, walk your hands over to the right side, press through the left hip and the left hand for a little extra opening on that side of your torso. On the next inhale, walk your hands back through the center and over to the left side, press through the right hip and the right hand for an extra stretch there. And on your next inhale, bring the hands back to the center. And then on the next inhale, bring yourself back forward to hands and knees. And now let's have a little bit of down puppy, which is another opportunity to lengthen the spine. So we'll walk the hands out ahead, leaving the hips back over the knees, supporting the weight of the upper body with the arms, making a line from your wrists up to the back of your hips. So you're making kind of a very shallow right triangle here. Press through the inner side of your hands and press into the pads at the base of the fingers, stretching long, forward through the fingers, back through the hips, square through the shoulders. And then let your elbows down to the floor, let your weight come forward. Might need to adjust a little bit to have your elbows under your shoulders, and we'll stretch long here. If you're going to deviate from a straight line from your knees up through the top of your head, make your bum a little high rather than a little low here. So stretching long here in this half plank, half forearm plank position. And then let your belly come down to the floor. So we're now in a Sphinx pose. And now we're making a little back bend shape. So we have a long spine. And we're going to lengthen it with a little back bend by drawing the elbows back toward the hips on an inhale, stretching along the big line of connective tissue that runs up the middle of the abdomen, up the middle of the thorax, up to the breastbone, up to the base of your neck, and then relax. Move your arms out to the side. Let your head rest on the hands. Bend the knees, take a little side to side swish. Bring your hands to the floor beside your ribs with your elbows sticking up so that you can press yourself away from the floor, coming back through hands and knees and taking a seat. So have whatever you like to sit on so that you can be comfortable and upright. It could be a chair. A chair would be fine, in which case sit a little forward on the chair so that you have weight going down into your feet and into the floor as well as into your sits bones. If you're sitting on the floor, the weight's a little forward on the sits bones and going into the sides of the legs and the sides of the feet. So let's extend the spine axially here. So put your hands on your rib cage just a moment. Actually, put your fingers at the top rim of the pelvis on the side, so at the top of your hips, and then feel with your thumbs for the small ribs at the bottom of the rib cage, and see if you can just kind of like an accordion, take the ribs a little away from the hips, but just straight up. Okay. Just get an idea, especially on an inhale, just straight up, making a little more space. And when you've got a feel for how it is to make a little more space there, then put your hands at the small of your back and also on the flare of your ribs in the front. And do that same thing, but just check that you're not inadvertently arching the back here. So we're just going straight up, not back bend up, right? So we'll just inhale straight up, taking the rib cage away from the hips on the inhale. So you'll often hear the phrase, knit the ribs together, draw the rib cage toward the hips. Well, it doesn't mean collapse, like you were a telescope collapsing the rib cage down into the hips. It means don't thrust your ribs out and make a back bend. That's the meaning of that. So we're looking for space between the hips and these little ribs at the bottom. So make that tall spine, shrug the shoulders up once or twice, get them relaxed, hanging toward the back of your body and away from your ears, and your elbows hanging down at your sides. Let your hands stretch out so that your fingertips touch the floor, maybe a little bit behind the midline of your body side to side, so that you create broadness across the shoulders, but not a back bend. And then just give a little push with the fingers to sit with a tall, tall spine here. And we'll use that tall spine as the basis for some twisting. So we'll inhale and sit very tall, lifting the arms up overhead. I can't lift mine too close. And exhale to turn toward your right, keeping your spine long. Let the arms just fall wherever they do, in front and behind. And now again, think of lifting the small ribs away from the hips as you breathe in and out in this twisted position. And on the next inhale, bring the arms up overhead, back through the center, and turn the other way toward your left. Let the arms fall wherever they might. You can draw the back shoulder a little behind you, turn your head as well if you like. And just think of drawing the little ribs away from your hips so that you have a long spine, plenty of space between the vertebrae to permit them to rotate past each other in the twist. And the next inhale, the arms come back overhead, and exhale, the arms back down. Now bring your legs out in front of you. So we'll have a staff pose. So notice what's happened with your spine here. Notice if your shoulders might have come a little bit forward and closer to your legs. So we want to be able to sit upright again here. Experiment a little bit with digging your heels into the floor, creating a little bend to the knees. I'll turn sideways so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm sitting like this, but maybe if I did this and sort of drew my feet in toward each other and bent the knees, maybe my back would sit up a little straighter. So just kind of experiment with that. And maybe that's the best posture for a staff pose for you, is with a little bend to the knees, maybe a little prop under the knees to let you have this very tall spine. And we could prop the fingers again to think of lifting the rib cage straight up and away from the hips. And with that very tall spine, we could hinge at the hips if there's room to do that without collapsing. So maybe just very slightly toward the legs. Keep breathing. And inhale, back upright again. Bring the soles of the feet together in a bound angle position. Let the knees flop out to the side. And sit tall here as well. So maybe you can sit taller if your feet are a little further away from your body. Maybe you sit taller when they're a little closer. Just experiment with what lets you create that space between the hips and the rib cage. Content your hands behind you. Press into the fingers a little bit, rolling the pelvis forward so your tailbone's kind of sticking out to the back, and see if that lets the legs relax so that you can sit with a tall spine. Just an experiment. And then we'll draw the knees back up to the center. Switch around again. And we'll do a little bit of sort of part of boat pose. So we want to sit very tall here, so with a very tall spine. So just experiment with how close your legs can be to your chest and still sit up really tall, making space between the hips and the small ribs. And think of the tailbone sticking out behind you. As you sit here, you can hold under the legs if you like. And we're just going to tip the weight back, keeping the spine stretching really long out the top of the head, keeping the shoulders broad. So maybe you can tip back a bit, really use the muscles and the lower abdomen, not just only the muscles at the front of the hips to make that tipping back. And definitely keep breathing, right? The really important part of yoga. Keep breathing, don't hold your breath while making an effort. And then we'll gather the abdominal muscles to sit back up again. And you can bring the legs out into kind of a wide position and just take a little rolling motion side to side with one knee dropping in and the other knee dropping out. And then we're going to come to a standing position. So do that in whatever manner is workable for you. If you can stand yourself up from the floor, that's fine. But if that's not workable, swing your legs around so you can come to hands and knees and bring one foot forward and then come up to standing. Okay. Okie doke. So let's take a long axial extension of the spine in a standing position. So we'll find the hip joints, line up the long bones of the legs, the long axis of the feet, more or less. If another position lets the weight be carried faithfully down through your legs and through the joints of the legs and into the floor, that's fine. Different people's bodies are put together differently. But we'll just take a tall spine here. So on an inhale, think again about lifting the rib cage away from the ribs, straight up. So not with a back bend, just straight up. Turn the palms forward a minute to feel broadness across the top of the chest, and then let the hands and the lower arms relax at your side. Let that axial extension travel right up through the back of the neck to where the spine meets your skull, up at around eye level. And now let's inhale and raise the arms up overhead. I can't raise them too tightly because I'll turn off my earphones. And take the axial extension of the spine here. And let's press the palms back down and then turn the palms up and scoop them up again, stretching long. And press and let them go back down. And now bring the arms to the front, inhaling them up overhead, paying attention to what's happening with the curve at the small of your back and with the rib cage. Exhale them back down. And just moderate that so that you're not thrusting the ribs out as you raise your arms overhead and create length in the spine. And exhale back down. That's great. Okay. All right. So let's inhale the arms overhead and then exhale and hinge at the hips. Keep the spine long. Keep stretching the rib cage away from your hips So we're coming over to this kind of L-shaped position. You can let your hands take some of the weight of your upper body here. You can experiment with a bend of the knees and see if that lets you have a more straight spine. That would be fine to have a bend of the knees. You can put your fingers at the top of your pelvis and your thumbs at the base of the ribs here, and see if you can kind of think like an accordion, stretching more length from the back of the hips to the top of the head by moving your rib cage away from the pelvis. And then exhale, let your hands run down a little more, give a bend to the knees. Inhale the arms up overhead. Bring the hands together and exhale the hands to the heart. That's great. And now let's sit into chair also with a long spine. So pause in the standing mountain position and create the length in the spine. And then bend at the ankles, the knees, and the hips to sit into chair, keeping that length in the spine. So we still have the same posture from the hips up through the top of the head. You can inhale the arms out to the side in cactus arms for broadness across the chest. And on an exhale, bend and bring the belly to the thighs, still keeping the spine long, reaching the arms back along the hips, stretching from the hips up to the top of the head. On an inhale, come back up to chair. Pause there for an exhale, and then inhale, press through the feet. Inhale the arms up overhead, and exhale the hands to the sides. That's great. So now let's have a few standing postures where we pay some attention to the axial extension of the spine. So almost always in yoga, we're looking for axial extension of the spine, even if we're making some other motion as well. There's not very many places, except some kind of forward folds and things, where we're not axially extending the spine, at least as a precursor to doing something else with it. Okay, so let's stand in a standing mountain position. I guess I'll turn sideways. We'll bring the hands to the heart, and we'll take a generous step back with the right foot, turning the heel in a little bit into warrior one legs. So the hips are off at a little bit of an angle, the torso rotated so that you're square to the front of the mat with the shoulders, a bit of a bend to the front knee, and then adjust so that you don't move your front knee further forward than your front ankle. And now let's have a little assessment of the spine. For one thing, we'd like to have the shoulders over the hips, so your weight is traveling right down through your torso and right down through the space between your two legs. So just let your arms hang down. See if they hang alongside your hips so that you can see that your spine is upright. And then we could put the fingers at the waist again to see if you have a long spine. And we could also bring one hand to the lower belly and the back of the other palm to the small of the back, and do a little tipping of the pelvis here, tucking the tailbone under on an exhale, tipping the tailbone to the back on an inhale. Yeah, notice how that's constrained by the position of the legs here. And settle down in the middle where you have a neutral spine. And let's raise the arms up overhead into a warrior arms, or if you like, you could have cactus arms instead. And now for a nice extension of the spine, we'll hinge at the hips to bring the belly close to the thighs, reaching from the back heel through the hips, through the shoulders, out through the hands. Keep breathing. Keep making your spine long. And inhale back up again, and bring the hands to the heart, and step back forward to the standing mountain position. Let your arms relax a moment. reorganize your standing mountain if it's gotten a little out of whack, as mine has. And close your eyes. Feel the weight in your feet. Feel the feet pressing down. Feel broadness across the shoulders. Feel length in the spine all the way out through the top of the head. And bring your eyes open again. Bring your hands to the heart. Take a generous step back with your left foot this time and turn the heel in on the back foot. Rotate the torso so that your shoulders are square to the front of the mat. Check to make sure that your torso is upright. We'll bend the front knee, adjust the distance as you need so that you don't have too big bend in the front knee, not past the front ankle. And look for length in the spine here. Stretching the rib cage away from the hips. And then we'll check again the position of the small of the back, looking for axial extension without thrusting the rib cage out, which is sometimes a temptation in Warrior 1 and Warrior 2. So we'll, on an exhale, tuck the tailbone under. On an inhale, tip the tailbone to the back. Notice where you feel this at your hips, the front and the back of each hip, what is happening there. Settle the pelvis down in a neutral position. Length through the spine. Inhale the arms up overhead. Either warrior arms or cactus arms will work fine. And then we'll do the arrow lunge, hinging from the hips, bringing the belly closer to the thighs, stretching from the back heel, up through the hips, up through the shoulders, out through the top of the head, out through the fingers. Stretching as long a torso as you can get. And inhaling back upright again, and bringing the hands to the heart and stepping back forward. Okay, so now turn sideways on your mat. So we'll start from kind of a wide legged position here with the toes pointing forward, and turn your right toes so that they are pointing toward a short end of your mat. And then the left toes with the approximately heel to heel alignment of the 2 feet, the left toes come around a little ahead of pointing straight out toward the long side of your mat. So your hips are pointing a little toward the front of the middle of your mat. Okay, and we're going to open the shoulders here, or rotate the torso to square the shoulders to the long side of the mat. You can reach your arms out to the side to see that. You can also observe here if your shoulders are centered over your hips rather than one way or the other. And think tall here. Turn the palms up for a moment to let the shoulders relax. And then just turn the palms and the lower arms over, keeping the shoulders relaxed and away from the ears. Okay. And now we're going to do a little triangle here to look for a long spine and triangle. So you can bring your hands to the rim of the pelvis, and we're going to tip the pelvis, but the spine doesn't bend, it stays long. Okay? So keep thinking long from the tailbone to the top of the head while you let your pelvis tip over and make an angle. So you're deepening the crease at the front hip, keeping the shoulders broad, keeping the spine long. Start to feel a big stretch, probably in the inner part of the front leg. You can just leave the hands on the hips like this. You can put your hand to the inside or the outside of your lower leg, or on the seat of a chair if you've got one handy. You can leave your top arm standing like a teapot handle, or you can just reach it out from the shoulder. But think long through the spine. So not collapsing into the bottom side of the body, but keep stretching long. Doesn't matter if you're not getting anywhere near to the floor. We're not aiming for the floor. We're aiming for a long spine. Let your arm down. If you've raised it, take a little bend to the front knee, rotate yourself back upright again, and let your arms drop and turn your feet to face back forward. And then we'll go the other way. So we'll turn the left foot so that it's parallel to the long side of the mat. Check your heel to heel alignment. It's easy to wind up being a little bit on a too narrow a track when you're swapping your feet from side to side. The back toes come a little ahead of pointing right out to the long side of the mat. We're going to swivel the torso so that the shoulders are square to the long side of the mat. Stretch the arms out from the shoulders again. And we're looking for shoulders over the hips. So the weight's traveling straight down between the legs. And we're also looking for length between the hips and the bottom of the rib cage, a tall spine. And then we'll bring the hands to the rim of the pelvis and keeping the tall spine, let the pelvis tip so we're deepening the crease on the front hip, the back hip is rising. We continue to stretch from the tailbone to the top of the head. This underside of the body stays long. You can leave your hands on your hips. You could put one hand down to the inside or the outside of your leg. Don't press down on your knee, though. That's kind of hard on the knee. Leaving the shoulders rolled open. You can leave the top hand like a teapot handle or reach it out from the shoulder. Head in line with the spine still, so you still got a long line from your tailbone out through the top of your head. Keep breathing. And lower the arm if you've raised it. Take a little bend to the front knee. Rotate yourself back upright again. Let the arms drop. Turn the hands, turn the toes back, and come back to a standing mountain position. Okay, so now we'll do a little bit of a balance pose here. And the feeling that I'm aiming for is of the upper body and the head having a buoyant feeling of being responsible for itself and kind of floating above the base formed by the feet rather than being a heavy burden down into the feet. So we'll start by standing in the standing mountain position, lining up the legs and feet under the hip joints. And let's start on the left side just for fun. So we're going to put the weight into the left leg, drawing the left hip a little toward the center, which is going to make the right hip hike up just a little bit. Maybe shift the weight of that standing leg a little toward the heel. So for starters, just think of making yourself very tall from your supporting foot out through the top of your head. Now we'll move the unweighted leg out to the side, just straight out to the side, so the toes and the knee and the hip are still pointing forward. Shoulders are pointing forward, square to the, well, it's the long side of my mat. It might be the short side of your mat. And now we're going to just let the right hand rest alongside the extended right leg and reach up with the left hand. So we're reaching up with the arm that is on the supporting leg side of the body. And then stretch along the spine, just straight up, not a back bend, just straight up. This would be fine if you want to stop there. If you like, you can take the unweighted foot away from the floor. Can help to give a little flexion of the foot on that unweighted foot to keep the muscles of the leg active there. Of course, you have to sway a little bit over to one side in order to stand on one leg, but think about limiting that sway and trying to keep yourself kind of collected toward the middle of your body. And breathe fully here. Go back to that lung extending sensation they had at the beginning of class to make the upper part of your body and your head feel buoyant above your legs. Pick something to look at that's not moving around. I'm once again standing on too many mats, so this is a sort of very squishy base of support. And when your hip starts to think, well, that's enough of that, then bring your arm down, bring your leg back down. Take a moment to stand in the standing mountain position and just take stock of how things are from side to side. Take a few relaxing breaths. And then just take any kind of loose blood that you'd like to relax any tension that might have arisen there while you were standing on one leg. And from the standing mountain position, we'll do that on the other side. So this time, shifting the weight into your right leg, drawing the right hip a little toward the middle of your body. The other hip comes up a little bit. Maybe the weight back a little bit toward the heel. Stretching long from your foot all the way up through your torso, out through the top of your head on the supporting side. Moving the unweighted foot directly out to the side. The toes and the knee are pointing forward. You can let your left hand rest along the left leg, and we'll bring the right arm up so that you're stretching from the right foot all the way up through the right fingers, straight up, space through all the vertebrae. If you like, you can bring the unweighted leg away from the floor. You might notice that on one side, there's much less tendency to sway off center than there is on the other side. That's perfectly normal. Everyone has got that kind of asymmetry. And for most people have the same one, regardless of handedness, even interestingly enough. So we're stretching from the raised foot across the body to the raised hand, from the hand pointing down along your leg to the hand stretching up from the supporting foot all the way up through the fingers. Lots of space between the vertebrae. Generous breaths, making the upper part of your body buoyant. And when your leg starts getting tired, then you can bring yourself back to a standing position. Do pause for a moment again with the eyes closed in the symmetrical standing mountain position, continuing to feel the upper part of the torso buoyant above the hips and the legs. And then you can take whatever kind of relaxing motion that you like. And now what we're going to do is we're going to have a little walk on the mat. So what I'm wanting you to observe in walking is see if you can feel as if your upper body is kind of independent of your legs, that it's kind of like it was two big balloons that were tethered above your hips. One big balloon for your rib cage and another big balloon for your head. So we'll just turn sideways because I'm going to walk in back and forth on my mat. I'm going to look straight out ahead so that my head stays tall, so that my eyes are looking out toward a horizon. And I'm just going to walk back and forth on the mat. When I'm walking forward, I'll strike with the heel, roll up through the middle of the foot. I'm pushing off through the big toe pad of the back foot, and then so forth. I'll just walk toward the front, and then I'll start walking backward. When I'm walking backward, I'm reaching back and sort of pulling myself backward, whoa, maybe falling over, with my toes, and then reaching the other foot backward. This is not a whole lot like regular walking, because in regular walking, you kind of fall from one foot to the other. But what I'm looking for is that feeling that the rib cage is elevated away from the hips. The head is elevated away from the shoulders, and that my upper body is minding its own business, and my legs can just walk back and forth easily underneath them. Very regal sort of feeling, you know? Like you were sweeping through the world with a tall posture, a tall head, taking generous breaths, filling the lungs and then emptying them completely. You can do this in a swimming pool. It feels great. The water gives a little resistance, but it also keeps you from falling over. It's a great feeling. And then we'll let that settle down, and you can just give yourself kind of a wide stance and a very easy bending of the knees, a little bit of twisting motion. Relax anything that got to feeling a little stiff. And then we're going to come back to the floor. You can come to the floor in any manner that seems comfortable and safe for you. If you would like to squat down to the floor, you can step your legs a little bit wide, a little bit wider than hips width, maybe more like shoulder width apart, maybe with the toes pointing out a little bit. You can bring the hands to the heart, and we're going to bend at the hips and the knees and the ankles. Let the knees come out in the direction of the toes, keeping the spine tall. Sometimes you have to let your heels come up off the floor. If your knees don't like this, you can put your weight into a wall to give a little support to the knees. And then just let yourself sink down onto the floor. We're going to come around onto the belly again. So you could bring yourself to whatever sort of plankish position you might like. It could be an elbow plank, half plank like we were in before. It could be an elbow plank with the legs extended. It could be a full plank of some sort, knees down or knees up, doesn't matter. In any case, stretch long from the whatever's planted, whether it's knees or from your heels out through the top of your head, and then keeping the elbows close to your body if they are not already on the floor. Lower your whole self down. Great. So let your chin or your forehead rest. And if it's comfortable, let your arms extend out in front of you. And then pick up one leg at a time from the hip and stretch it away from you and set it back down. So we're creating lots of space here. Looking for the long spine again. And we're going to do two things. We'll do a little bit of sort of a super person pose. So we're going to stretch through all four limbs at once. So on an inhale, reach out through the fingers and out through the feet. Let that carry your legs a little away from the floor, from the hip, your arms and a little bit of your chest away, and exhale back down. And just repeat that a few times. Inhaling up, exhaling down, inhaling up, exhaling down. Now that makes a little bit of a back bend. We'll release that by just rolling the bent legs, the hips a little bit. And then let's have just a little bit of cross body motion here. So again, with the hands and feet reaching out, this time we're going to reach opposite arm and leg. So reach back with the right leg and out with the left arm, and exhale that pair down. And then the opposite pair, and exhale down. Just a couple more rounds. Notice that it probably feels rather different, the two pairs. Again, part of recognizing, just observing the asymmetry in your body. And then you can let your hands rest under your head and bend the knees. Take a swish from side to side. And then roll yourself over onto your back. So lie on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat. And we're just going to take a little restorative twist here. So first do that same thing that we did earlier. Pick up your bum and stretch the hips away from your shoulders. Kind of dig in the heels, stretch the spine very long so that you first have made lots of space between the vertebrae. Stretch the arms out to the side with your palms facing up. And then let your knees flop over to the left side. You can turn your head to look toward your right hand. If your legs don't rest comfortably and you've got a little pillow or towel or something handy, you could give them a prop so that they have a place to relax. And as you're lying here, think long through the spine. So a longer spine is a more comfortably rotated spine. And then on an exhale, gather yourself back to the center. And then on an inhale, let your legs come out to the other side, your knees come to the other side, your head can turn toward your left hand this time. Might feel different from side to side. Think long through the spine. And the length makes the rotation more comfortable. And then again, bring yourself back to the center on an exhale. It is time for a short Shavasana. So if you would like a longer Shavasana, just turn yourself off, leave the meeting so that you can relax in Shavasana as long as you like. Otherwise, choose a comfortable position, whatever you like. If you've got a chair handy, you might like to put your legs up the chair. On the chair, if you have a wall handy, you might like your legs up the wall. You might like the classic corpse pose, either with the lying on your back with your legs stretched out, or you might like to have your knees bent and your feet flat. Make yourself comfortable so that you can become very still. Let your breath settle. Let your breathing become a little deeper, a little more active. Emphasizing the inhalation. Bring a little bit of motion to the hands and the feet. Take any kind of stretch that you are craving. Bend one knee at a time to bring your knees close to your chest, or just knees bent, feet flat on the floor. Take a little easy sway or easy rolling side to side. Let yourself roll to one side. Rest there with your eyes closed for a few breaths. And then use your arms to press yourself away from the floor on an exhale, letting your torso kind of face down toward the floor so that you don't have much work to do with your torso or your head or your neck. Take a comfortable seat just for a minute here. Then recross your legs to the position that you didn't choose first. Looking again for a tall spine. Space between the top of the hips and the little ribs at the bottom of the rib cage. Space between the ear and the shoulders. Space along the back of the neck. We'll bring the palms together and the thumbs near the breastbone and close with one Om after an inhale. Namaste. It's good to have all of you practicing together today. I'm glad we're able to do this.